The new channel. The new channel. Hashtag TNCNow.
The views, opinions, and insights expressed in the following shows are those of the host, producers, guests, and viewers. They do not necessarily reflect the position of the channel. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to the new channel. Our passion transforms a community that sees and shares all things new. I am Deivid Rioferio and you're watching Insights and Perspectives on TNC. Now let's talk about learning as one nation. Our guest for today is the president of the Central Visayan Institute Foundation. He is also a recipient of the 2010 Ramon Magsaysay Award. Kasama po ang kanyang may bahay, si Dr. Maria Victoria Carpio Bernido. Ginawa po nila itong CVIF-Dynamic Learning Program. Sir Chris, welcome to the program.
Thank you, David. Thank you for the invitation.
Sir Chris, matagal na po kayo sa larangan ng education. You've been a professor in the University of the Philippines and a visiting professor sa iba't ibang colleges and universities in the Philippines, an active scientist worldwide. Ano pong nakita ninyo na pagbabago sa education system ng Philippines at ng mundo in the past few decades?
Well, ang pagbabago is actually driven by the changing technology and yung tinatawag nilang fourth industrial revolution, which outpaces the educational sector. Sabi nga nila, ang younger generation ngayon will have to learn 4 or 5 new skills during their lifetime because technologies change so rapidly. So that's why I'm thinking about the program which could be learned which would help the new generation learn independently.
Ito pong CVIF Dynamic Learning Program, you created this in the late 90s or 2000s. Bakit po ninyo naisip gawin yon, Sir Chris? And with Ma'am Marivic, of course.
Well, the CVIF Dynamic Learning Program, or DLP for short, was created because of a need, problems that existed all over the country in the Philippines. And apparently, this problem still exists up to today. So 21 years later, it still exists. And the most important problem would be the lack of qualified teachers, which is felt not only in our country, the Philippines, but also in other countries like Germany, Portugal, Canada, US, Australia. They also lack teachers. That's why they recruit a lot of our Filipino teachers and bring them to their country. And so the dynamic learning program addresses this particular problem, and as well as the infrastructure problems, like especially in the Philippines, there's a lack of classrooms, especially in big cities. There's a growing population that could also be addressed by the CVIF Dynamic Learning Program.
Sir Chris, meron pong 4 na components yung CVIF DLP, parallel learning classes, number 1. Number 2 is learning activity sheets. Number 3, use of comprehensive student portfolio. And 4, strategic study and rest. Bakit po kailangan lahat ito gagamitin doon sa CVIF DLP? Pwede bang 3 lang or 2?
Well, if you want to get the maximum result, you have to adapt the 4 pillars because they're all tied together. In fact, the the most essential component, if in a regular classroom or regular school day, is the parallel learning classes. If
Mm-hmm.
you adopt the parallel learning scheme, everything sort of follows. The other components follow, and they cannot be avoided in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Sir, I was doing some readings about parallel learning classes. Ang isang teacher can handle 2 to 3 classes in 1 hour. Paano po nangyari yun, sir?
Well, if I am a biology teacher, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and I am assigned 3 sections in high school, for example, to teach, in the traditional, I would be teaching these sections sequentially, like 8 to 9, section one, 9 to 10,
Mm-hmm.
section two, and maybe 2 to 3 p.m., section three. In the parallel classes scheme of the DLP, I will be teaching these 3 sections simultaneously. For example, 8 to 9 in the morning, I will be
Mm-hmm.
teaching these 3 sections simultaneously, and I will be moving from one section to another while the students are going through independently, going through the learning activity sheets. That's why the learning activity sheets, which we shall simply call LAS, the
Mm-hmm.
LAS naturally follows from a parallel classes scheme.
Mm-hmm. Pero sir, ibig sabihin 75 or 70% of the time, ang teacher hindi siya makakapagturo. Okay lang po ba yun?
Yes, that's by design. We actually want the
Mm.
subject teacher to be outside of the classroom uh, 70 to 80% of the time, so
Mhm.
that independent learning could be achieved. Um, Everybody's saying everything should be learner centered, but then the
Mhm.
subject teacher keeps on intervening. He or she lectures 100% inside the classroom. That's not being learner centered. So we
Mhm.
put a structure, it's a structural change to the learning dynamics, so that it automatically becomes learner centered. Because if the biology classes are held simultaneously, the 3 sections from 8 to 9, it becomes impossible for this subject teacher to be inside one classroom 100% of the time. The
Mhm.
biology teacher has to move from one classroom to another, and if the teacher cannot trilocate or bilocate, then it becomes impossible for the teacher to be 100% in one section, and so it automatically becomes learner centered and independent learning by the students through the help of the LAS, or learning activity sheets.
Mhm. And these LAS, sir, are based on books. Tama po ba?
Yes, the LAS are designed, are made by the subject teachers, and they could get the content. The LAS is one concept, one page, and to make the LAS, the teacher has to uh, he or she does not have to rely on one book. He could go through the internet, okay,
Mhm.
look at the internet, look at many textbooks, and then choose the textbook or site which simplifies the subject matter, and then he or she could base the writing of the LAS on that particular thing. So you're not limited to just one textbook. You have the whole world actually as your reference.
Mhm. Sir, sige po, I'm trying to picture, no? So, meron pong isang teacher mag-handle ng 3 sections in 1 hour. Gamit niya ang learning activity sheets para less yung kanyang intervention, focus tayo sa learner. Ang bata po, they will copy. Yun po bang one page na yun? Isusulat sa blackboard, sa blank sheet of paper?
That's correct, David.
Mhm.
In order for the students to be engaged with or without the subject teacher, they have to copy the LAS, the learning activity sheet, starting from the activity title to the learning target to the concept digest for that particular topic, followed by an illustration or drawing, and then followed by 2 or 3 questions. That should only be in one page. So they have to copy that, and that's part of the strategy in the DLP to quickly engage the students, and actually writing slows them down,
Mhm.
um, and the moment they copy. So one thing also I should mention, David, for any given topic, for any new topic to be introduced at any grade level for any subject, there is
Mhm.
no prior lecture on that topic.
No prior lecture.
Wala pong lecture, wala pong introductory lecture, kumbaga. And so their
Mhm.
first encounter, the students' first encounter with the topic will be through the LAS that they will be copying. So there will be a lot of questions in their mind. There will
Mhm.
be a lot of things that they don't understand initially, and that's what we want. We want to create questions in the minds of the students. It's
Mhm.
like farming or planting something, David.
Opo.
You don't plant immediately. You have to till the soil, and in this case,
Okay.
by the students copying the LAS, you're priming the mind of the students such that when the time comes, when the subject teacher comes in, they're already curious. They're already, in fact, they become very attentive, and they don't even know it.
Hmm. Kasi sir, kung ako po yung teacher na first time kong madidinig yung ganito, or parent or student, medyo magiging parang effective ba 'yan? Talaga bang magaganap na, very dynamic yung sa brain ng bata? Gano'n po ba yung na-observe ninyo, in the schools, in your school, and sa ibang schools na nag-implement ng DLP?
That's true, David. It has been observed not only in our school. There are a
Mhm.
lot of performance indicators, but there are also a lot of cognitive and neuroscientific studies that writing by hand actually is superior to just listening.
Mhm.
There are studies done in at Princeton, at University of California, LA. Many scientists are already curious about the writing by hand, because it deepens the comprehension of the student. It And they found out that in exams, the performance of the students who wrote by hand is superior compared with those who just listened, or even compared with those who used laptops
Mhm.
during lectures.
So Sir
So
Chris, sige po.
yeah, and also many schools which have adopted the dynamic learning program. There are a lot of performance indicators. I may mention
Please.
in Mindanao, there's the Davao Christian High School, which has great performance, and they have been implementing the DLP since 2005. In the Visayas, of course, we have the CVIF. In North, I would like to mention the Stella Maris College in Cubao. They have been implementing the DLP maybe for the past 10 years. And way
Mhm.
up north would be Nuestra Senora de la Salette. They applied the DLP from kinder up to grade 12. And
Mhm.
some colleges have also applied the DLP. And so it's really the performance indicators which should convince people.
Mhm. Sir, in your past lectures, nababanggit po ninyo, no, if a program, an education program, gives constant results, kahit pa unti-unti, basta umaakyat, i-apply ninyo. Paki-elaborate nga po yun, sir.
Yes, actually the progress in the school's progress in the DLP is not really overnight. But what we notice though is that they say there's a J when you introduce a new concept, a new program, a new strategy. They say there's a J curve. That means it goes down first and then it goes up. What we
Mhm.
notice in the implementation of the DLP is that there's no J curve. It
Really?
just goes up. You can already observe the changes in a matter of weeks. The first observation will be in the behavior of the students, and then
Mhm.
later on in the exams, in the grades, and so on. So, but it takes a little while, but the performance is really dramatic. For
Mhm.
example, in Davao Christian High School, more than 50% of their examinees in the National Career Assessment Examination in mathematics, more than half of their examinees belong to the top 1% in the whole country.
Mhm.
And they started uh, 5 8 years earlier with just 3% belonging to the top 1% in the whole country. But now they're over more than a half of the examinees. It takes some time.
Mhm.
And initially it's the bright students which will be affected first.
Mhm.
Makikita nyo so any school which adopts the DLP should do a frequency distribution results of the exams, because very quickly you would notice that the bright students would move up in their performance, and it takes some time for the challenged learners to follow, but they will follow. We have seen that in many schools.
Mhm. Sabi po nila, Sir Chris, happy na raw sila 'pag yung halimbawa yung top 10 nila ay magagaling talaga. Pero sabi po ninyo dapat, whole spectrum ang ating ina-address. Paki-elaborate ngayon, sir.
That's right. In the traditional, most of the students that are addressed are the bright ones. They're the ones who answer during the recitation and so on and so forth. The DLP is actually addressed to the challenged learners. That's
Mhm.
why they write. It slows them down, and they absorb the subject matter slowly. You see, in any program in any school, the top tenors will always fly. They will always do well, whatever
Mhm.
your program is. So you don't really worry about the top tenors. You worry about the lower 80%, lower 75%. And that's
Mhm.
what exactly what the DLP addresses, the bulk. And that's why, and this is reflected in the national exams. Normally,
Mhm.
in the national exams, what they report is the performance of the bulk, the performance of the cohort. And if it's just the top tenors who are performing very well in the
Uh-huh.
traditional, their uh, their performance as a school will be pulled down by the lower 80%. But in the DLP, everybody gets pulled up.
Mhm. Kamusta po ang journey ninyo when you started implementing DLP in your school, and then yung ibang other schools nakita yung performance, nagpunta sa inyo. Madali po ba na naipakalat sa Philippines, or was it really your objective na i-share siya sa ibang eskwelahan, or just to start first in your school?
Well, actually, David, we were just solving the problem in our own little school,
Uh-huh.
and up to now, we never really advertise, or we never really go out and tell schools to adopt it, because DLP is not an easy program.
Uh-huh.
So when schools come, we explain to them, we orient them, and they may or may not adapt. When we get invited to workshops and conferences, then we talk about the DLP, but we never really on our own um, advertise or talk about it, because we believe in the saying that you can bring the horse to the water, but you cannot force the horse to drink the water. So there has to be an initial interest first from the school, by the division or whatever, and they might invite us, and then we orient them. And some of them will adapt, some of them will not adapt, some of them will adapt partially. But what I
Mhm.
noticed about schools which adapt partially is that after 2 or 3 months, they go back to the traditional.
If I were a private school, public school, big or small school, meron po bang difference sa pag-adopt or sa pag-implement nitong program?
Wala naman po. We've had schools, which the smallest would be one section per year level. And I can
Mhm.
quickly think of two examples. Nuestra Senora de la Salet in Dagupan City started with just one section per year level. They adopted the DLP. Another
Mhm.
would be the St. Francis School in Silay. They started
Mhm.
with one section per year level, and they adopted the DLP. So the DLP and the pillars of DLP are flexible enough that you could actually still implement the four pillars, even if you have a very small school. You can also adapt it to schools with 1,000. Well, at the CVIF at the moment, we have
Mhm.
2,000 plus students. So, and we are applying the DLP. So it could range from a small to big school, from poor schools to really rich schools, like, for example, Davao Christian High School, from rural schools to urban schools, like CVIF is located in a rural area,
Mhm.
and Stella Maris College in Cubao. Cubao is a very commercial area, is also adapting the DLP. So it's quite flexible. It's quite adaptable to many situations, David.
Mhm. Sa kwento niyo po, Sir Chris, parang matipid gamitin ng DLP, 'no? Kasi parang hindi mo kailangan ng notebooks and books. Tama po ba na matipid siyang gamitin? And kung ako naman po ay eskuwelahan na may kaya naman, okay lang din po ba na gumamit ng ibang mga improvements like technology in implementing DLP?
Yes, definitely. If you're a rich school, you can your references would be increased, and you can make use of the technology, as long as you understand deeply the four pillars, that they will not be sacrificed. So yes,
Mhm.
indeed, it's cheaper, David, because if I may say, and some sectors might not like it, you don't really need textbooks. The whole school,
Uh-huh.
the students do not need textbooks. It's only the teacher who would need a textbook, because he or she would make the learning activity sheets, so you don't need textbooks. And in fact, when at one time the DepEd superintendent of Manila division of
Mhm.
Manila DepEd, he said that that was during the pandemic time. He said that even after the pandemic, the DLP would still be needed. And I said, why? He was an urban planner, right? But he was the superintendent. He said that because not all students can be accommodated in the classrooms. We don't have enough classrooms. So
Mhm.
classrooms require money. To build classrooms, you require money. But you can run the DLP even without regular classrooms. So in that sense, it's also cheap. So you don't need the infrastructure so much. You don't need the textbooks, and you can even minimize the number of teachers that you want, because most of the learning of the students will be through the LAS.
Mhm.
So in that sense, everything becomes cheaper. And there have been studies, like there's school in Cebu, Site Academy, a
Mhm.
site school, no, a center for industrial something. They did a study on the reduction of the cost in terms of electricity, in terms of teachers, in terms of, and they presented their study in one of the workshops, and indeed they have percentages of percentages of the decrease in the expense in their school.
Mhm. Sir Chris, ito palang panahon ng pandemic, no? So, merong blended learning, online and offline. So, uh, effective din po ba ang DLP that time?
Yes, you can take this extreme. Like, for example, in our school, only about 90% of the students have good connectivity. And so
Mhm.
what we did was, the core, the learning activity sheets, we printed them, risograph, and then we distributed. We had 18 or so distribution centers within
Mhm.
our town and neighboring towns, distribution centers for this LAS, so that the parents could go to the distribution center and pick the LAS once a week. And while they get the LAS once a week, they also give back the LAS that was accomplished by their children the past
Mhm.
week. So all throughout the pandemic, learning was ongoing, and we have
Mhm.
also an exam given to just to check this out. So right after the lockdown in March 2020, the head of Davao Christian High School texted me, and he said that, thank you very much, but because of the DLP, we had a smooth transition from normal times to the pandemic period, because for one thing, the students were already used to independent learning. And so the idea was just to, uh, for the LAS to reach the hands of the students, which could always be done. And so the learning continued without much disruption, even during
Mhm.
the from normal times to the lockdown.
Sir, very tricky po ang paggamit ng technology ngayon ng mga bata because of some apps that somehow encourages them to cheat, sabihin na natin, ano? Paano po nakakatulong ang DLP to mitigate this?
Yes, one of the problems of educators now is Chat GPT, which
Mhm.
writes essays, for example, just like a
Yes.
person. Precisely, this problem is also addressed by the DLP, because a core part of the DLP is that the student should copy by their own hand, their own handwriting,
Mhm.
the lessons. So this is one check that it's not just copy and paste or chat GPT by the students, and the lessons just, pahapyaw lang, dadaan lang sa kanilang mind. So the
Mhm.
writing is really an answer to this problem of chat GPT, because when they do the answer the questions, or even ask, they have to write the answers by their own hand. So that is
Mhm.
an insurance that at least the answer passed through their brain, to it activated their neurons,
Mhm.
because all the answers in the LAS and even the exams will have to be in their own handwriting, and not
Sige po,
just
sir.
copy.
Thank you, Sir Chris. Meron pong question dito from Christy of Tokyo, Japan. Kaibigan ko po ito. Nagtanong siya, paano daw po nag improve yung focus ng mga bata sa school using CVIF-DLP?
Well, actually, there's much less focus when the student is just listening to a lecture. uh,
Mhm.
your mind flies quickly once you hear a word, and then
Yeah.
but here, since you're copying from minute number one, okay, the first 3 minutes, it already engages the students, focuses the mind of the students, because he or she has to copy the activity title, and even writing and copying the activity target already intrigues and focuses the mind of the student. Ito pala yung target for this lesson. Then they
Mhm.
would be copying, encountering a subject matter for the first time in the concept digest in the LAS. So yeah, it helps in the focus because of the copying precisely. And this was also the founding of the many researchers abroad,
Mhm.
when it comes to handwriting. There, you just Google handwriting and learning or handwriting in education, and they have seen there are a lot of researchers, and they have seen that it's actually superior. So that's
Mhm.
also the answer, the handwriting.
Opo. Sir, another question po, sabi dito, paano po nakakatulong sa pagiging makabayan ng mga bata ang programang CVIF-DLP?
Well, your question reminds me of Stella Maris College. Actually, they are it's analogous, no? They're
Mhm.
a religious school, and they always incorporate values into each LAS, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's mathematics, whether it's social science, history, or whatever the subject matter is. In the LAS, one of the questions they would incorporate would be the value system. In fact, with the Catholic bent.
Mhm.
So, that's one angle in answering the question, that you can insert values at Makabayan, uh,
Mhm.
in the DLP. Another answer to the question at a different level is, if you really want to help your country, you can help your country to the utmost if you develop yourself. You become an engineer, a writer, an artist. Develop yourself to the utmost as a Filipino, and then you will be contributing to the world knowledge as a Filipino. So the only way, the bottom line is, you cannot give to others what you do not have. So if you want to give to your country, you have to have it in yourself first. So develop yourself. Be a good scientist, be a good engineer, be a good painter, be a good writer, and then give to your country, give to the whole world. Ganun ang magiging makabayan na talagang may impact, David.
Ang galing naman, Sir Chris. Ah, pine-present niyo po ang CVIF-DLP sa iba't ibang scientific conventions in the Philippines, abroad. Kamusta po? Anong reaction nila?
Their the reaction is always positive. The reaction is always that they're excited. But then, being excited and agreeing with the program is one step. That's the initial step. But
Uh-huh.
applying it and dealing with the local culture, the entrenched culture of, say, the Germans, or the entrenched culture of the Portuguese teachers, or the entrenched culture of the Filipino teachers, is a completely different story. That's
Mhm.
why the head of the institute, it could be a superintendent of the division or the director of a school, they have to understand deeply the philosophy behind, or the well, it's easy to understand, but the reason behind the pillars or the components of the DLP, such that when complaints come in, there are
Mm.
always complaints when a new project is implemented in any endeavor, because nobody wants to get out of their comfort zone, right, David? So
Opo.
if the head of the institute or the DepEd superintendent starts to receive complaints, he or she should be able to explain and stand by the decision to adopt the DLP, because in the end, the bottom line is, you want your students to learn.
Mhm.
And if you think that the DLP will allow your students to learn, then you stand by it. But if you don't want your students to learn uh, maximum or optimized learning, then it's okay. You can give up this and that, compromise this and that. So it really depends whether you understand your mission in education, your mission in life.
Last couple of questions, Sir Chris. Kamusta na po yung ibang mga alumni ng CVIF-DLP? Nasaan na sila ngayon?
Yeah, they are getting scholarships. They're passing the UP College admission test, and there's also a question: can they perform well in the really top schools in the world?
Mhm.
Yes, they can. An example would be Ronald Joren. He is now studying marine science at the ETH Zurich. If you Google Etihad Zurich and the discipline Marine Science, Etihad Zurich Marine Science is number one in the world. Talo nila yung Harvard, talo nila yung MIT, talo nila lahat. But then, our student got into this program in marine science, and he has published papers, and he will be defending, if he is not already defending, his thesis this month or next month. So he
Mhm.
did well. And we have other students like in physics, Madeline Naiga. He will also be finishing this year. She has already, she is in Max Planck Institute, University
Mhm.
of Dresden and Max Planck Institute. And Max Planck Institute in Germany is a very, very difficult institute to enter. Maraming taga-UP na hindi nakakapasok dyan. And these
Mhm.
students and other students like Jessa Caseñas got her BS in anthropology at Berkeley, and Berkeley is a top school. And these three students that I have mentioned never had, uh, they only had 20% lecture in their whole high school. They never had a homework in their whole high school, the DLP way. And so these are, again, performance indicators in flesh and blood of the effect of DLP on the students for the graduates, the alumni, David.
Sir Chris, para po doon sa mga gusto mag-implement ng CVIF-DLP, kanino sila pwedeng makipag-coordinate or makakuha ng mga sample LAS trainings?
Well, for the trainings, um, the first thing that comes to my mind is smart communications, because smart communications created way back 10 years ago the so-called DLP ambassadors. The DLP ambassadors consist of teachers from DLP implementing schools, and these DLP ambassadors are sent to different schools or divisions which would like to learn about the DLP. Smart Communications has, as part of their CSR, the propagation of the DLP, especially to the public schools. So you can contact Smart Communications. You could also contact World Vision or contact you, David, in fact.
Yeah.
Um, and um, for the LAS, Learning Activity Sheets, which would be the core of the DLP, they can go to the CVIF website. It's cvifbohol.com, small letters, tuloy-tuloy, cvifbohol.com. And then just click the e-learning, and they could download for free all the learning activities from grade 7 to 12 for all subjects, as far as the LAS is concerned. And there are also a lot of uploaded sites explaining the DLP, which uh, they could ask you, David, or Smart Communications, or whoever. So that's one way. Or they could visit a DLP implementing school to
Mhm.
observe. If you're in Metro Manila, go to Stella Maris College. If you're in Davao, go to Davao Christian High School. If you're in Northern Philippines, you go to Nuestra Senora de la Salette.
Sir,
Those are the things that come to my mind, David.
Sir Chris Bernido, thank you very much po for your time.
Thank you, David, for the invite. Always a
Th-
pleasure.
Thank you for watching Insights and Perspectives on TNC. God bless you.